All right, Stochastic, here we go. It's your old pal EMac coming to you on a Saturday morning with the one and only Adam Ship, my money sharer. It's been a hot minute since I've done a show with him. We'll have to catch up on all his adventures and how he feels about Greg Ehrenberg being the most recent six-figure winner amongst the regular analysts here. Adam, welcome back from your well-deserved respite.
Thanks. Yeah, good to be back. And nice to have the throwback old school Saturday show.
It is. Yeah, once upon a time, this was a regular thing where I tend to go to bed early, so I get up early these days. Once you hit your 50s, it's a lot different than when we were first doing these shows. I had a little more pep in my step if I stayed up late. Last night I did not make it. I think I went to bed about midway through the third quarter of that Portland-Memphis game, and I had a lot of players in that, like the field did, and I said, oh, wouldn't it be something if it went to overtime? And I woke up this morning and looked, and I had a very nice night last night because sure enough, that game did go into overtime, and we saw some heavy minutes there from the regulars. But did you have any good wins since you are back on air now?
No, it's been a rough few months. I had a 20K hockey win a couple weeks ago, but
okay.
Yeah, it hasn't been good. So hopefully being back to work helps that out.
Yeah, that'll get you back in the swing of things.
Yeah, it was a quick reminder of how stressful things get when you don't just have like the content paycheck coming in, and it's just like, oh, like I'm losing money this month, and I'm also losing money this month.
Yes, that is the one thing that always tends to offset stuff. That's why I'm going to keep my day job.
Yeah, the first year after I quit law school, I didn't do any like before FanVice, I didn't do any content or anything, and that was like my plan. And then it was just like, holy shit, this is stressful.
Yes. Humboldt says EMac has a shirt that says I like to party, and by party I mean go to bed at 8 o'clock.
I was in bed before you last night. If you saw some of the I fell asleep before the Portland game started.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I wanted to see some of it. It was pretty good. But yeah, I kind of miss out. Lindquist was giving me crap because I was posting in the DFS 101 channel. So if you guys are a member of Stochastic, you get all of our Discord, and we have a nice DFS 101 channel. And I was talking about some promos on DraftKings and crown milestones and stuff like that, and the college basketball starting up. By the way, we have projections for that via Matt Kajeski. But he was giving me crap because the timestamp for him looked like I was posting at 2:42 a.m. I was like, well, it was 5:42 a.m., so it was still early, but I was already slept my 8 hours, so I was getting up. And I said, us old guys, we don't stay up late, but we love our afternoon naps. So it's fun how when you're a little kid, you hate naps.
Yep.
Now it's one of my favorite things to do. So always good times. All righty, let's jump on in here. We're brought to you by Bet365 today. We'll talk about them, but a reminder, if you go in through the link below us here and sign up, if you're in one of the 6 lucky states in which they have their offerings, that would be Colorado, Kentucky, Iowa, New Jersey, Ohio, and Virginia, you can get an opportunity to wager $5 and immediately get $150 in bet credits. You have a week to use those, but that's a pretty sweet deal. Just for clicking through our link here. Reminder, if you or anyone you know has a gambling problem, please call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. And the standard age for sports wagering in most states is 21. In Kentucky, it is 18. All right, Adam, let's check out our games. We have a handful of teams on back-to-backs, but we also have quite a few teams that are on island games. So we'll call those out as we meander through here. We're going to look at these game by game. Of course, things dramatically change throughout the day with injury news, people getting sick, etc. So this is a good example of how to read a slate. And this information, a lot of it will still hold true tonight, but things can shift dynamically. We've already seen that, and we're 10 days into the NBA season. But we're starting out here with the Charlotte Hornets. They are in Indiana taking on the Pacers. Hornets are 4.5 point underdogs on the road. This game has a 238.5 implied point total. The only person missing here for Charlotte is Cody Martin. On the other side, we have Indiana. This is a back-to-back for them and a 3-4. They beat Cleveland last night, 121-116. Bruce Brown Jr. played 37 minutes. Tyrese Halliburton had 34, and Miles Turner had 31. So not a ton of minutes on anybody. The one concern is Halliburton was questionable with an injury coming into this game. we'll have to see how he responds on the back-to-back. But for now, let's assume full health. What do you got for us in our first matchup, Adam?
Yeah, so I mean, it should be a high-scoring game. A lot of ownership coming into both sides. Terry Rozier pulling 26% on DraftKings, Hayward pulling 16%, PJ Washington, 6K, power forward, pulling 19%. So those three pulling the most ownership, pretty easy to get to at those respective salaries. LaMelo Ball projected to go a bit under owned. He's getting 7% ownership at 9,100 on DK, 13.5% chance of being optimal. So looks like a guy that you're probably not building around, but that is a good way to be different in tournaments. But it looks like Rozier, Hayward, Washington, the priorities from that side. And then, like you said, Tyrese Halliburton was questionable yesterday. He had missed the previous game. So remains to be seen if he will suit up tonight. But assuming that he does, 9,200, he's getting 29% ownership, 39% chance of being optimal. Just a really, really strong play at that salary in a good matchup. The assist numbers are insane. Obviously, he's a capable scorer as well. We have him projected for 54 DraftKings points right now, which makes him look really good. LaMelo Ball is like the very obvious ownership pivot there if you need it, where he's getting 150 ownership. But Halliburton looks really, really good if he's in. Similarly, Miles Turner at 6,700, coming off that huge game last night at low ownership, projected for 42% ownership right now, but still a 32% chance of being optimal. Only $6,700, plenty of block upside, capable scorer, all of that. So Halliburton and Turner pulling tons of ownership. Bruce Brown at 5,400, point guard, small forward, very useful. Positional eligibility, going a bit under owned. 15% chance of being optimal, 8% ownership. So looks like a pretty good piece to, sort of fill out lineups. Jalen Smith's only 4,100. Not somebody that you're going to be overly confident in backing up Turner, but 4,100 at 11% ownership as a value play looks decent right now. It is the type of play that as stuff opens up throughout the day, it probably starts to disappear.
That makes sense. I do want to call out on Yahoo. I had a nice little night over there with my Friday lineup. I do like to play in their Friday tournaments. That is a lot of fun. We have Tyrese Halliburton at $39 over there. So he stands out as an outstanding option. Miles Turner at 28 also looks good. For those of you that don't play over there a lot, that they do have no multi-position eligibility. They do have a flex spot, so you can play two centers, and more often than not, that's kind of the route you may want to go. It's fun playing over there. It's a more unique build. It's a less less optimal for optimizers. It's less I like to build one or two lineups over there. It's a lot of fun for me, and it's an entirely different salary structure than the rest of the sites, and that they tend to have players that go overlooked because of where they sit. Either the people that is chalk everywhere else doesn't really work there, or they have players that are tertiary options on DraftKings and FanDuel that stand out there. So if you play there semi-regularly, you can spot those. It's like stepping off a curb and getting hit by a cement truck if you miss them. But again, the stochastic projections do cover that side as well.
Yeah, I saw also in chat, Brandon Miller and Mark Williams mentioned. Okay. They're both good enough point per minute guys. Brandon Miller's at 0.93 for the season. Mark Williams a little over a minute fantasy point per minute. The problem really, though, is just the way that they're priced. So neither one's getting any ownership. Brandon Miller's coming in at 5,500, Mark Williams at 5,900. If you could guarantee that one of them were just going to get a lot of minutes, they'd both be reasonable plays at that salary. But the problem you've seen is, like last game, Brandon Miller closed over Mark Williams, but Brandon Miller didn't play a lot in the first half. 2 games ago, Brandon Miller played 36 minutes. Like, if you were getting that kind of game often, he'd look good, but it's just not going to be there all that often. Mark Williams played 23 in that game. So the fact that Mark Williams isn't guaranteed to close is what makes that $5,900 price tag scary. And then for Brandon Miller at 5,500, the fact that you're most likely talking about 24, 25 minutes makes it not a very appealing price tag either.
All right. How do you feel? Pardon?
Are we live on YouTube? I can't find
it. Yes, I can. Let me.
I figured we were since people were in chat. I just don't know.
Yes, I will. Oh, you got it. Okay.
Yeah, I just missed it 5 times.
Yes. Last week I sent us out on the wrong link. You weren't on the show, but I grabbed the wrong one in StreamYard because, of course I did. They didn't have it. They didn't have the night, the live before lock show set up when I went in there first thing in the morning. And so then when I went into StreamYard again, I just grabbed the top one, because that's what it was before and they had added it. So I was like, oh, great. Minutes. Speaking of minutes, LaMelo Ball. How are you feeling about that sort of soft minutes cap that he has? He's hit 33 minutes in 2 of his last 3. Last year, he was regularly getting 35, 36. Does that concern you at all? I would assume in a close game, he may get there a little more, but I also think they'll have a quicker hook on him.
Yeah, I mean, it's concerning, but like the thing too, like last game, he had 5 fouls, so he didn't play.
Okay.
I don't know that the fouls were I don't think the fouls were the reason, but he didn't play. He didn't close the first half. So like there were minutes he could have had there, but then he ran like a longer rotation in the fourth. I think expecting around 33 minutes from him is good. Yeah, there's some chance he ends up getting to 35. There's also obviously a chance he plays like 30, 31. So I think from a projection standpoint, around 33 makes sense. And I think that's why you see part of the reason, at least, you see the difference in projection between Tyrese Halliburton at 54 DraftKings points and LaMelo at 48. 33 minute or 32 and a half minute projection for us on LaMelo, 35 and a half for Halliburton. So, you're talking about not only is Halliburton a very, very good fantasy producer himself, but 3 more minutes from a projection standpoint for Halliburton.
All right. I see Jojo in chat says, why is Adam on the wrong side of the screen? Because I changed it. I am the captain today when we do these shows. Plus, I have a screen on this side, so I'm looking at my larger screen, and then I've got my laptop screen here. And if I do it this way, then it looks like I'm longingly gazing at Adam and hanging on his every word of his analysis. If I flip this the other way, then I would look like I'm staring off to the side of the screen where there's nothing there. So I just did it so it didn't look quite as awkward. Not that I need help. Or not that I can save myself from looking awkward, but that's kind of why we have that there. All right, game number 2. We have the Atlanta Hawks in New Orleans taking on the Pels. No real news or notes here on Atlanta. I do know that Trae Young was a little dinged up a couple days ago. Seems to be okay. Atlanta underdogs by a bucket. For the Pelicans, we have a few question marks here. Zion Williamson was out the last game, but that was a back-to-back, and that was for rest. He is supposedly good to go today. Brandon Ingram, questionable. He's missed the last 3 games with a knee issue. We don't know what's going to happen there. Grand Theft Alvarado is out for like another 4 or 5 games. Najee Marshall is also out. The other thing to remember is this is a 3 and 4, though they did not play last night. But they were coming off a back-to-back. That's why Zion got the rest here. How do you feel about Atlanta here? Things are slightly different without John Collins. We've seen the post players, Capella and Okongwu, have good games, still kind of at the expense of each other. You've got the guards both looking relatively solid, but they're kind of missing that third offensive option these days. What do you got for Atlanta?
Yeah, we've seen Atlanta get a lot of ownership on some slates recently, and that's not really the case today in terms of any one player getting a ton. But as a team, you're just getting like 5 to 10% ownership across the board. DeJounte Murray leading the way on DraftKings, point guard, shooting guard at 7,700, 10% ownership, actually an 18% chance of being optimal. Very good fantasy producer, still very reasonably priced at 7,700, even though that has come up a bit. Trae Young getting half of Murray's ownership at 9K. Again, he just projects behind LaMelo. He projects behind Halliburton, but as a result, he's only getting 5% ownership. He's still obviously capable of giving you those massive games, but it's just tough for him to be the best play that often in that range because the other 2 project better at that salary. And then, whatever else we have to talk about throughout the show. You're getting the center minutes still split between Capella and Okongwu. 20 and a half minutes for Capella last game. Okongwu played 27 and a half. We've seen Okongwu frequently closing these games. I think from a projection standpoint that projecting them basically to split the minutes is a very reasonable way to go. Right now we have Capella at 25. We have Okongwu at 24 and a half. We have Okongwu at 23 and a half. I think, something in that ballpark, 25, 23 makes perfect sense because it's difficult to just assume that Capella's on the lesser end of the minute split long term, but we do know that they like Okongwu. They paid him. He's stealing these closing minutes often enough that I don't think you should be projecting it as if he's like a true backup either. So we have seen his price tag finally move. He's up to 4,700 on DraftKings, still getting about 10% ownership, which is perfectly fine. Capella at 5,800 getting 8%. That's sort of like Mark Williams, where if it had like there's no way to know it going into the game, but if this happened to be a game where Capella plays 27 minutes and gets those closing minutes, that's a really favorable price tag at 5,800. The problem is it's a really, really bad price tag if he's only going to play 20, 21 minutes, sort of like we were just saying with Mark Williams. So very risky play, but certainly has the potential to pay off if he just happens to find his way into the closing lineup. DeAndre Hunter, Bogdanovich, Jalen Johnson, Sadiq Bey, all pulling 5 to 10% ownership as well. They're sort of just last piece in, filler type pieces, not guys that you're excited to get to, but playing time should be there. Sadiq Bey moved into the starting lineup last game, played 32 minutes. I think that got slept on a little bit. People didn't really react to the news of him replacing Jalen Johnson in the starting lineup. It didn't really pan out in tournaments if you did get there, but $4,500, if he's still in the starting lineup, I think you're expecting around 30 minutes from him. And that does look pretty good at that price tag. Jalen Johnson still priced up at 5,600. Assuming that he comes off the bench again, he played 24 minutes. Makes it really tough to want to get to him when Bey is $1,100 less.
All right. And then I'm preemptively asking the question for chat. Are you setting any restrictions from Okongwu and Capella playing on the same lineup tonight?
Yeah, I would. Now that the salaries have come up a bit, it was a little bit different when, you're talking about like a 50 whatever hundred Capella and then like a 3,800 Okongwu.
Right.
But now that Okongwu's up to 4,700, generally you're going to need him to be stealing some of those Capella minutes. And the big thing is still, I think, the Capella price tag. Like if you tell me that Okongwu, if you tell me they split 24-24, Okongwu at 4,700 still looks like a pretty good play. Capella at 5,800 is a tough sell. And so that's sort of the issue is if you think you're going to need more than those 24 minutes for Capella, then you're saying, okay, do I really want in those lineups? Do I want Okongwu for 22 minutes at 4,700? And the answer is probably you can do better.
All right. Stephen Leibowitz. Yes, you can go grab another cup of coffee. I got you, buddy. I got you. Before we get to the Pelicans game here, I'm going to drop in the link. Someone was asking, do we have any MMA content? I don't think we have a DFS video today, but Greg does put them out from time to time. If you look on the Stochastic YouTube channel, you can see if we have anything scheduled for later today. This is the one that, remember, we have the Odd Shopper, which is our sister site. There is a betting video that's already been posted for today's cards. I know at least one fight was canceled in the last 24 hours. I have not looked at MMA yet, so I'm not totally up to speed on that. But that video looks like there's at least 4 or 5 fights talked about. They're just eyeballing it quickly. The other thing I want to remind everybody is, Halloween, right? Time to trick or treat. So we have a treat for you. It is the promo code NBA treat that gets you 50% off the NBA lineup generator package. After that, it'll just be $8.95. So even at regular pricing, it's just over $1 a day. The lineup generator is the perfect tool for building winning DFS lineups. It takes care of getting all of those pesky bad lineups out of the mix, and it is just creating positive expected value lineups for you. It is leveraging all of the other tools that we have here at Stochastic, including the simulators. That is all going on in the background. We are looking for various correlations, not quite as much in basketball because you really have, one assist on a pass. And even then only about 25% of buckets are assisted. So it's not quite the same as correlation as the NFL or the MLB, but there is slight correlations and some negative correlations. It's accounting for all of that in the backside. It's also looking to find you leverage as well as boom bust plays in there as well. So it's a pretty good deal. That is promo code NBA treat, all one word, 50% off your first week. And if you slide on in there into that package, you also get the Discord as well. So good to have. All right, the Pelicans side of this one, Adam. I am guessing, I'm just going to operate under the assumption that Brandon Ingram is out again and Zion is in. Do you have any lean on Ingram, and what would you like to do with this game?
I don't have a lean on him. Right now we have him projected in, and that's just generally how I use
it's one of those, it's like, if they're questionable, we project them.
Right.
When they're doubtful, we knock them a little bit, so they're not, you don't lose sight of them, but they don't get into your rosters. When they're probable, we assume it's a full go.
Yeah. So I mean, all of the data right now for the Pels is assuming Ingram plays, but
Okay.
I think that's a true toss up, and obviously has a huge impact here. Zion should be back. He was out last game, so you got Matt Ryan in the starting lineup along with Jordan Hawkins, with Ingram and Zion out. Zion being back means Matt Ryan is not a concern on this slate. If Ingram is in, then Jordan Hawkins also goes away. He's up to 4,900. Absolutely needs to be in the starting lineup for you to be considering him. He burned everybody last slate. Had the massive game, or had a good game 2 slates ago. Could have been a massive game where he had 13 3-point field goal attempts, made 2 of them, still had 30-something DraftKings points in that one. So, if Hawkins ends up starting in place of Ingram, he is still a viable value play. As that salary comes up, it becomes, less and less appealing, but 4,900 is still reasonable if he's starting, and it's completely useless if Brandon Ingram is back and Hawkins is coming off the bench. So, going under the assumption for now that Ingram is in, Ingram looks like the best play from the Pels if he's in and not on some significant limit. Shooting guard, small forward, always really valuable. 8,100 is a good price tag. 21% ownership, 14% chance of being optimal. No, everything looks fine there. Going a little bit over owned, but nothing too crazy, especially when you factor in that you can use him in so many different sorts of lineup constructions. McCollum would look like the second best guy at 7,900, 4% owned, 7% chance of being optimal. Even if Ingram's back, McCollum still plays a big role in this offense. If Ingram is out, then McCollum certainly looks better at 7,900. There's more for him to do, both as a scorer and the playmaker. But Ingram looks like the priority if he's in. If he's out, McCollum looks better. Zion would look better, but it's still tough to get to him at $8,900. Joe Val's priced up to $6,900. Playing time for him is difficult to count on. Larry Nance has been his true backup. Last game, you saw 32 and a half minutes from Joe Val. You didn't have Zion in that game, so they did, I think, needed, or not, I think. You didn't have Ingram, you didn't have Zion. You need more offensive firepower. So I think that's one reason probably that you saw more minutes for Joe Val. Larry Nance is a different player. He's not the guy that's going to be out there scoring for you a lot and doing a lot offensively, which they needed. So with Zion back, I think it is likely that you get back closer to like a real split between Joe Val and Nance. At the very least, it makes those closing minutes for Joe Val pretty scary because they could close with Nance. They could close with Zion at the 5. We've seen them go that route as well. So those minutes were just more secure last game when Zion was out for a couple of different reasons. The price tag jumped to 6,900. So it becomes really difficult to get to him now that Zion's back.
All righty. Anything else you would like to highlight from this other than CJ McCollum being amazing? Always worth mentioning.
No, I mean, just you need the Brandon Ingram news.
All righty, let's maneuver along. We have the Los Angeles Lakers in Orlando taking on the Magic. Lakers favored by a 3-pointer. It is a 219 implied point total here. Los Angeles will be without Rui Hachimura, who's in the concussion protocol. Jared Vanderbilt is still dealing with a sore heel, could be out for another week. You have Tarian Prince, who is questionable with a knee issue, and this is an island game here for the Lakers. On the Orlando side, Gary Harris is out with a groin issue. Markelle Fultz missed the last game with knee swelling. This is also an island game for the Magic. These two teams, of course, squared off in Los Angeles a few days ago, so we saw how the matchup sort of played out there. Was Prince a late announced out the other night? I didn't have him.
The game was supposed to start. Yeah, he got hurt.
Yeah, which makes sense, but just the number, not the late scratches at this point or the resting already, but just the injuries. It feels like there's a lot more at this point than there has been in a while.
Yeah, well, that was the Alec Burks day too. So you had 2 of them in the same day where they got ruled out after the games, quote unquote, started. Yeah, so that I mean, that was weird. Like obviously a really weird day, but yeah, I had like 75% of him on the night slate, so I went to bed early that night.
Look at that! See, it's your health. Your heart rate is up because you're mad, but then you go to bed early, right? And it offsets. Exactly. So there you go. Alrighty, how are you feeling here about the Lakers? We have LeBron on the. What do you project him at? Like baseline 29, 30 minutes. And then if it's a close game, he's going to play more. If it's not a close game, he's not going to be standing out there for 7 minutes in the fourth quarter, directing traffic. Is that
I think around like 32 makes sense for LeBron. 32. We have him at 34, so that's even a little bit higher, which I think is okay. We saw, he played 29 minutes or whatever, and they said that was like the plan for the season, and then that just hasn't been what they do at all. So, I think expecting somewhere in like the low to mid 30s makes sense. He played, 43 last game, which I believe was an overtime game, so 38. Yeah, I mean, I think 34, what we have at 34 is very reasonable. If you wanted to go 33, 32, I think that's fine as well.
And the other, that was, so to put him at 34, that's what helps keep him in the projections. Then for those of you that are doing a lot of, mass multi-entry, you want to keep tabs on how many lineups end up with LeBron. So you want him to at least get into the player pool. That's where you may want to set a cap to not have him overrepresented for something that needs a little luck or a few things to break your way to get.
I don't know that I would say that though, because like 33, 34 is still a pretty solid median projection. Like there's going to be games where he just plays 37, 36, 37. And there's going to be games where, competitive games even, where he plays 30, 31. So like if you're using a 33, like a 32, 33, 34 minute projection, that's pretty representative, I think, of like kind of his median playing time and where, I think you can kind of treat him like anybody else. If he's showing up, he's showing up. If he's not, he's not. If you were projecting like 36, 37 minutes, like what you're saying, I think is like, if you're looking at it like, okay, well, I'm not getting LeBron in 34 minutes, but I know that he can play 37. Let's bump him to 37. Then you want to definitely be making sure that like bumping him to 37 doesn't suddenly make him, an 80% play for you, because know that you're taking the higher end of his minutes. But if you're using projections, like ours that have a 34-minute projection, I wouldn't worry one way or the other about what you're getting, because I think that is a very solid, just median range. I don't think it's like,
the over-representation, that's what I would be worried about.
Yeah, but yeah, like I just don't think 33 or 34 minutes is like over projecting him to where, like, if I'm getting a lot, okay, I'm getting a lot. Hopefully this is a 36-minute day.
All right. Talk to us about the rest of the Lakers here. You've got Anthony Davis looking pretty good. He's healthy for the time being. You've got D'Angelo Russell, relatively solid. Christian Wood. Some of these guys, I guess, they're better off on the late slates than they are. They're kind of tertiary plays on the main slate. But what do you like from the rest of the Lakers?
Yeah, there's some pretty solid plays here. We talked about LeBron. He's getting 14% ownership, 13% chance of being optimal on DraftKings at 9,300. So that looks pretty good. Davis, center only on DraftKings at 9,900. So you do have plenty of opportunity costs because of the position, but he's been playing big minutes, typically playing a couple minutes more than LeBron does. Last game where you got 42 and a half in overtime for LeBron, you got 47 and a half for Davis. I think projecting him for around, if you're projecting 34 minutes for LeBron, I think projecting 36, 37 for Davis makes sense. That is one thing that I do think you should be paying attention to, whether you're doing your own projections, whether you're using ours, using somebody else's. There should be a gap in minutes between LeBron and Davis, where Davis is favored by a few. And for us, it's 34 for LeBron, 37 for Davis. But I think there's like a tendency to just kind of give star players 35, 36 minutes, across the board. And this team, like Davis, barring foul trouble, injury, all of that, even in games where LeBron plays a lot, Davis is generally playing more. So I think that is something to keep in mind and pay attention to. He's been very good. Happy to get to him at 9,900 if you can. Really like the price tag on D'Angelo Russell at 6,400. That just hasn't really been increasing too quickly. Playing times there. Last game, you got 36 minutes, but he only played a minute and a half in overtime. So you're still talking 34 and a half minutes or so in regulation, typically getting in that range from him. So he looks pretty good. He, so far this season's averaging about a fantasy point per minute, again, projecting north of 30 minutes at 6,400. That's going to look pretty good in a solid enough matchup as well. Christian Wood at 5,200, we have getting 10% ownership. We only have him with about a 4% chance of being optimal. He played 29 minutes last game, but again, he picked up 3.5 minutes in overtime. He subbed in for D'Angelo Russell. He closed alongside Anthony Davis. So it is nice that we're seeing, Wood play plenty of minutes alongside Davis. That does increase the minutes he can play. Generally, you're expecting him to play around 23, 24 minutes, which at 5,200 is fine. It's still risky. A little over a fantasy point per minute for him so far this year. Not surprising to see his production down a little bit, given that he's pretty much always going to be sharing the floor with at least one of Davis or LeBron.
All right. Sorry, I didn't read out all my notes. I forgot to mention Gabe Vincent out with a knee issue. He could be out for, at least a week. And then on the Orlando side,
Vincent?
Pardon?
Who did you say, Vincent?
Yeah, I meant Vincent. I don't know what I said,
no,
but
yeah,
I
didn't hear what you said.
Oh yes, but where I was going with the Wendell Carter Jr. I did not have him on my initial list. He is out for at least 3 weeks with the finger injury. So that kind of tweaks things around, maybe a little Moritz Wagner in the mix here. It does open some front court minutes. You've got Gary Harris is out and Markelle Fultz questionable with that knee issue. All of a sudden went from what was a rather deep rotation is kind of tightening up here a little bit. Talk to us about the Magic here. I had initially not thought much of them, but remembering that Wendell Carter is out does at least put Paolo Banchero in play a little bit, both of the Wagner brothers, etc.
Yeah. One last thing I wanted to mention I forgot with the Lakers, with Taurean Prince being questionable. If Prince is in, I don't think he's a great player or anything at 4,400. If he's out, you should get plenty of playing time for Cam Reddish if he starts again at 4K. He's not a great fantasy option, especially on this team, the way that they're going to use him. But shooting guard, small forward, 4K, if Cam Reddish gets the start, that's a viable value play. As far as the Orlando side goes, it'll be interesting to see who gets the start. Mo Wagner has been the backup to Wendell Carter. He's been playing all of the minutes that Carter doesn't. Generally, you assume that guy is going to move into the starting lineup. If he does, you have a $5,100 Mo Wagner. Power forward eligible on DraftKings is really nice. So the price tag has already adjusted. Josh and I were talking, or at least adjusted somewhat. Josh and I were talking about it a lot yesterday. DraftKings has been very proactive with their pricing this year, which I think is fun. I think it, like, the lineups that you build are going to look better when they're not as aggressive with the pricing. I just kind of enjoy playing the game more when they are more aggressive. So, 5,100 for Wagner if he's starting, solid value. But, again, it's not like you're getting like a $3,600 starting Mo Wagner or something where you would just be playing 100%. They have already adjusted the price. Where it could get really interesting, though, is Goga Batadze's 3K flat. Now, if they were to just insert Batadze into the starting lineup and keep Wagner in his backup role, then you just have kind of a free square. Assuming for now that Wagner does get the start, you still have, a 3K center that could play 20 plus minutes depending on how the game goes. So somebody, you could potentially roll the dice on, but we'll have to see how the starting lineup looks there. Fultz is obviously a huge piece. If he's in at 5,300, he looks very good. That's a very, very inexpensive price tag for Markelle Fultz. If he's out, we saw Gary Harris move into the starting lineup last game. He then also got hurt, didn't start the second half. Joe Ingles started the second half. So the big takeaway for me last game without Fultz was that Orlando appears to prefer keeping Cole Anthony on the bench, keeping him in large part away from Jalen Suggs. They did play some minutes alongside each other, but I think that one way or the other, if Fultz is out, it's likely that you get Joe Ingles starting, sort of just like a placeholder type guy. So if Fultz is out, Suggs will look better at 5,200 than he does when Fultz is in. Cole Anthony will look better at 5,400 than he does when Fultz is in. Both of those guys are playable one way or the other, but they certainly look better without Fultz.
All right. I'm mentioning Yahoo again because I do like chasing the at least reduced rake over there. Their floor is $10 players, and not all $10 players are created equal, but the ability to play two centers is key. Tonight, you've got both Mo Wagner and Goga Batadze at 10. You have Christian Wood at 12. You've got Jalen Smith at 11. We didn't really mention him, but $11. He's an interesting guy for to flirt with 20 fantasy points. But then the big one there is Onyeka Okongwu, who is just 14. So you can find a lot of maneuverability there with the center position. So I just wanted to call those guys out there. Anything else from our game, or shall we continue onward?
I didn't say anything specifically about Banchero, but okay, he's good. Same for
there we go.
They're both just correctly priced.
Covered the bases. We're on to the next wave of games, starting off with Boston. They are in Brooklyn taking on the Nets. The Celtics are 9-point road favorites. Looks like a 230 implied total here. You have Boston on an island game. Brooklyn played last night. They won in Chicago 109-107. Their starters averaged between 31 and 33 minutes, so nothing overly concerning there with regards to workload. Cam Johnson is out for a couple weeks with a calf issue. And then Nicholas Claxton has not yet played with an ankle issue. He is at least doubtful for today, but that's different than being out. Take us through this one, Adam. Boston, almost double-digit road favorites tonight. That's pretty wild.
Yeah, plenty of blowout risk in this one. But, yeah, so the one interesting thing for Boston, we don't have Derek White today. So that does open up minutes potentially. Peyton Pritchard's 3,600, probably going to play a bit more than he normally does. Potential value piece there. But outside of that, it's pretty much status quo with Boston. Drew Holiday at 6,800 looks fine. 10% ownership, 10% chance of being optimal. Al Horford only $4,700. Probably plays a little bit more without White. 14% ownership, 18% optimal percentage. He looks like a decent value at power forward. We know that Jason Tatum is always a solid option. He's just priced up. It's tough to get to him. Jaylen Brown, 8K, so that price tag's increasing a bit. Only 2% owned, shooting guard, small forward. I've generally been over the field on Jaylen Brown in this price range so far this year. Wouldn't be surprised if I'm getting there again today. Obviously, there is blowout risk, but if it's Jaylen Brown carrying them to blowout, then who really cares? Porzingis, 8,300, not getting much ownership. Tough to really like that price tag. So from a value standpoint, Horford and Pritchard both looking decent. I assume Horford moves into the starting lineup, so he would be the preferred option there as far as value goes. And then from a mid-range standpoint, I think Holiday, probably the first guy you get to. Jaylen Brown, to me, is very interesting, though, as a 2% owned contrarian play.
All right. Thank you. I must have had my filters set wrong for today, but you are correct. Derek White away from the team with attending to a personal matter. How many people intrigue you from Brooklyn here? They all kind of are neutral. Again, I mentioned they didn't really play a ton last night, but what?
I said like zero.
Like zero? I'm ready to skip them to make up some time here. So
I
didn't want to.
The guy getting the most ownership on DraftKings right now is Ben Simmons at 5%. I think that's where you go first. He's point guard, small forward, but you have Dinwiddie back. That's going to cut into Simmons' playmaking. His price tag has come up a bit. The matchup sucks. Dinwiddie's relatively inexpensive at 6,300, but you can find plenty of other guards. This is one of the less appealing teams, unless we get guys ruled out on the back-to-back.
All right. Now we've got some fun to talk about here. We've got Houston hosting the Sacramento Kings. For Houston, no Tari Eason, no Amen Thompson, no Victor Oladipo. Does not really matter. For Sacramento, no De'Aaron Fox dealing with the sprained ankle. He may end up returning as early as next week or at the beginning of the week, but that still doesn't help us for tonight. We have a 222 projected point total here. Sabonis. How are you feeling about his chances at a triple-double tonight, Adam? He was second in the league last year behind only Nikola Jokic, and I believe he led the league in double-doubles.
Yeah, I mean, Sabonis is obviously really good. The one thing that I think to keep in mind, and we saw this constantly last year, there's always a tendency when you have a team with two stars and one of the stars gets ruled out to just automatically assume the other star is going to be really, really good. You can certainly argue Sabonis gets more opportunities without Fox. His fantasy production is about the same because the pick and roll between Fox and Sabonis is such a big part of the offense for Sacramento and such a big part of Sabonis's game that it just, even if he's going to get more opportunities, he loses efficiency and it's kind of just come out in the wash. So Sabonis to me is kind of just the same play he would be anyway. 10,200 at center, 8% owned, 11% chance of being optimal. Looks fine, but there's plenty of other plays in that price range if you have the salary. He's more expensive than Anthony Davis, which is problematic. So just, sort of a secondary option to me. And I don't think there is really anything that stands out from the Kings because pricing has already adjusted pretty quickly. Davion Mitchell moved into the starting lineup in place of Fox. He's already 4,800 though. He actually had a solid fantasy game, came out, knocked down some threes. Very unusual for him. Not something that you typically can count on. At 4,800, doesn't look that great. 6% ownership, 4% chance of being optimal. Herder at 5,100 is okay. He's somebody you could see take on a little bit bigger scoring workload without Fox. Monk is always kind of interesting when Fox is out because with Monk, if he comes in and just gets hot, he will take minutes. He can take minutes from Herder. He can take minutes from Keegan. He can take minutes from Barnes. There's different ways that the Kings can deploy their lineups if Monk is playing well. The problem is just that he's already 5,700. So you're paying a price tag where you need him to go out there and play well. It's not like he's 4,800 and you can really take on that volatility. It's really risky to get to him at that price tag. Keegan's getting the most ownership at 6,500. He played 39 minutes last game. He's playing big minutes. He can score a bit more without Fox. I think he's a reasonable play. But again, that 6,500, the price tag is just kind of already adjusted.
Yeah, those are all good calls. And as we saw, to your point, the ability for these guys to be interchangeable, and they can all steal minutes from each other between Murray, Barnes, Monk. I'm missing one of the Herter. We saw this last year in extended time frame, for an extended fashion, when Fox also had an injury. So it's a great matchup. Definite tournament upside for these guys, but trying to tackle one of them as the key play, a little tough, which is how I circled back to Sabonis. And mine is more the floor, the floor being lifted up, and he does have a slightly higher assist rate without Fox, which makes sense. But he and Fox battle each other for assists all the time. Foul trouble has been an issue far too many times with Sabonis in these types of situations.
Yeah, the Kings to me, and like I'm not saying this is like you should set a rule or anything. The Kings to me are like there's not one guy on this team that stands out as a great play at their respective salaries. But if it just worked out where I happen to have like a Sacramento player in most of my lineups, I would be very happy because it is a good spot. And there is the thing you have to keep in mind when you're talking about salaries and projections and all that. You're talking about median projections. And so none of these guys look very good at their salaries from a median projection standpoint. But within any given game, there's a pretty good chance one of these guys just greatly outscores their median tonight. It's just that none of them project as particularly good values. It's more when you start accounting for range of outcomes. So there's not one guy I'd expect to be jamming in, but I would be more than happy if it's just like, this lineup has Herter, this lineup has Sabonis, this lineup has Keegan, and kind of like that.
Turning our attention to the Rockets, do you see any elite plays, like perhaps Fred Van elite?
Yeah, I mean, the whole team looks good. Kind of different than the Kings. Like, it's a good spot for both sides, but Houston's pricing is just more favorable. Şengün at 8,200, only getting 5% ownership looks like a pretty good tournament play. 8% chance of being optimal. And then outside of that, all of the starters are just getting ownership. Jalen Green, 21%, only $6,300. Dylan Brooks, 5K, shooting guard, small forward, getting 24% ownership. Hate rostering Dylan Brooks when he's popular, but at 5K, like it's just a really cheap price tag in this matchup. The minutes are there. Obviously, he's coming off of a really big game against Charlotte where he wasn't popular. Josh talked about him at length. I talked about him. Neither of us ended up playing him, and he went nuts, obviously. But he's still 5K. The minutes are there. Shooting guard, small forward, 23% owned, 23% chance of being optimal. Van Vliet at 7,500 is a very fair price tag. He played 39 minutes last game, so it's like he never left Nick Nurse. 16% ownership for him. Jabari Smith at 5,700 getting 21% ownership. He played 30 minutes last game. It just looks the starters on this team look very, very good tonight.
Yep. I see Josh Gilliam is saying Jayshawn Tate value. Maybe on the 8 o'clock sub slate. Tate, he does a little bit of everything. He arguably qualifies for almost every position. He is, what was he, like a 4-year player in college? He's a perfectly good NBA 8th man rotation guy. Yeah, whatever you need that night, he can go do.
He's a $4,100 guy that played 18 minutes last game. He's in a good game environment. He played 22 minutes the game before that. Like the nice thing about Jayshawn Tate, if like for whatever reason you were insisting on getting him in lineups, is like if anything goes wrong with one of the starters, Jayshawn Tate can benefit because of his versatility. But on the main slate, 4,100, I have a hard time getting there. Projected for 2% ownership, 2% chance of being optimal.
Yeah, but these are the type of plays that are good call out plays for the sub slate. This is one that's not going to talk about. Everybody's going to be like, well, I'm more telling that to Josh Gilliam. It's like, I'm not besmirching you're bringing him up. Just let's frame it with a little more context. And yeah, all of a sudden he does sort of become part of our plans as we shrink the player pool. And those are the players that get lost in the shuffle that they aren't covered in the standard free content that's out there. So if you aren't, getting at least decent projection sites, or you don't know how to read a slate on your own, you're going to overlook those guys.
Yeah, and he mentioned Thompson being out. It didn't benefit him in the second half last game. It certainly could benefit him at least somewhat today.
Yes. Anything else from this game here? We got 2 to go.
Just to follow up on that, like Thompson played a minute 16 seconds in the second half last game. Jayshawn Tate played basically the exact same rotation in the second half that he had in the first half. The only difference was that he was on and off with Şengün as far as closing goes down the stretch. But you didn't see like bigger, longer rotations, more rotations or anything for Tate in the second half of that game. You saw Aaron Holiday get minutes. So with Thompson being out, sure, like Tate could play more, but there's also the chance that they just basically do what they did last game and Aaron Holiday is now in the rotation.
Alrighty, so everybody, just one more reminder, since they are the presenting sponsor of our show, we've got the Bet 365 promo. You've got bet $5, claim $150 immediately in bonus bets, or, and I'm going to drop this landing page in chat here. This describes it a little better. Or you can choose with your first bet. Again, you got to come in through our link, but you can get your first bet as up to $1,000 wager with the safety net is what they call it. So if you lose your first wager, instead of doing the bet 5, get 150, you bet up to 1,000, you'll get bet credits back. You only have a week to use them. It's kind of running the math. If you have a little more disposable income, a little higher risk tolerance, going for that $1,000 first bet, probably the steady way to go. If you're a nit, then I would recommend the bet 5, get 150. So you'll want to check that out. And this goes for any of the sites. I am more of a nit, but I usually do play these. I'd usually opt for these large second chance bet opportunities. If you lose, though, you are chasing to kind of break even. So it's one of those, it's like, and I think I'm 3-2 now on these in my favor. But it gets a little stressful when you lose them because you're like, I usually make wagers in the $10 to $50 range. Betting 1,000 is a lot of money, but you can check out that landing page there. It breaks down a few other things and all of the other terms and conditions there. All righty, we have game number 6 of our 7 games. It is the Utah Jazz at the Minnesota Timberwolves. Island games in both directions. Remember me in both directions. What do you got here, Adam? Take us through the Utah side. 5.5-point underdogs in Minnesota. I can't believe this is only a 215 over under. Did I mistype that? It is a 225 over under. There we go. I knew that was looking a little low there. So yes, misclicked the 1 and the 2 there. Talk to us about the Jazz.
Yeah, so prices have started to adjust a little bit for Utah. They were a really, really popular team on the 3-game slate last time they played. They've been pretty good values in general. Prices coming up a little bit, but I think you can still look to this team as, secondary plays. Nobody's standing out as a great option. Jordan Clarkson leading the way on DraftKings at 15% ownership. His salary jumped from $5,400 last game to $6,100 tonight. But this is a spot to keep in mind. Like, yes, at $6,100, he is obviously riskier than he was at $5,400. But Jordan Clarkson was just like unbelievably underpriced at $5,400. So moving to $6,100 doesn't just mean, oh, his salary increased, he's too expensive now. He's just closer to where he should be. He's only averaged about 0.9 DraftKings points per minute so far this season, but you certainly can see generally averages more production than that going forward, or generally in his career has averaged better production than that. Only 49% true shooting so far this year, 24.5% usage. It's likely that you do see increased production from him going forward. So pulling 15% ownership, he looks fine. John Collins has been another solid option so far. His salary moved up a little bit more to $5,900. 33 minutes last game. So far this season, Collins averaging just shy of a fantasy point per minute. So you're probably getting around 32, 33 minutes or so from him at $5,900, getting 6% ownership. Good play in tournaments. I don't think he's somebody that you're just jamming into lineups necessarily, but at 6% owned, he looks pretty good. Markkanen, obviously more expensive at $8,700. Very good point per minute guy. He's at 1.35 DraftKings points per minute so far this year. Last year, he was about 1.22. We saw him really improve last year from his time with Chicago. $8,700 is a pretty fair price tag for him. 2% ownership. He's just another one of those guys where you're not expecting to just get a lot of lineups that have Lauri Markkanen showing up. But if you have, 6 popular guys, 5 popular guys in a DraftKings lineup, and you're like, all right, I have the money for somebody. I want somebody low owned that also does still have a high ceiling. Markkanen is perfectly fine in those types of builds. Horton Tucker, 5,500 shooting guard, 13% owned. His salary again came up a little bit. He played 31 minutes last game. He's averaging a fantasy point per minute this year. really, really ugly player to watch and root for. 48% true shooting, 21% usage, but kind of just has always gotten it done as a fantasy producer. So nothing, again, like that looks like a true priority here. Clarkson, Collins, Horton Tucker, I think the easiest guys to get to. Marketing, if you do happen to have some tournament lineups where you can afford him, is pretty interesting at 2% owned.
So I said, remember me on both sides. What I should have said is what could have been. That was the Walker Kessler. Like, hey guys, you could have drafted me instead of trading all those picks for Rudy. What the hell has happened to Walker Kessler? His per 36 is just cratered. He's down 2 points per 36, down a block per 36, down 2 rebounds per 36. His minutes have not been great. They're similar to what they were last year on the average. However, he picked up a significant amount of playing time in the back half of last season. So just looking at his season over season averages isn't the way to look at that. What do you think this is he just off to a slow start? Is the addition of Collins messing things up? Is Markkanen's rebounding getting in the way more this year? Do you have any? I mean, Kessler is still in play for your blocks wagers, but I don't want to play him in DFS.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a take on like real basketball, what's happening, but he hasn't been as productive. He's still 6K is the problem, so it's really tough to get to him.
Drop him into the low 4s. We have an entirely different conversation. We're talking about what if he gets 3 blocks in a double-double? Oh my God, he's going to break the slate. Now it's like, yeah, he's going to break your bankroll if you roster him at 6K and he keeps performing like he is.
Yeah, I mean, like the best case I think you could make for Kessler is that he hasn't been playing well. What happens to his minutes if he does, or if and when he does start playing well? But at 6K, that's just like not a spot that I really want to.
And center,
gamble.
Which
right, yeah, and center
cost.
He's definitely somebody, like you said in the 4Ks. Like if he gets down to like 4,500, then he's just gonna be like a really obvious play. But he is somebody that if and when his salary does start creeping down, definitely somebody just pay attention to, because it's gonna get to a point in tournaments where it's like, okay, Walker Kessler's 5,200, he's 6% owned. There's a good chance that you have big games coming, but at 6K, it's just so tough to pay that.
All right. Reminder, everybody, on the YouTube channel, the Stochastic YouTube channel at 11 a.m. That is 7 minutes from now. You're going to get College Football Live Before Lock. That will be with Matt Gajewski and Ben Rossa. You will want to check that out. Take us through the Timberwolves here, Adam. They're always appealing. This is no longer a slow and plodding Utah team. They, of course, revamped everything last year and have become less a new coach, too, or new-ish coach compared to the Quinn Snyder era. Definitely a change in playing style and philosophy. How are you feeling about the Timberwolves tonight?
Yeah, a lot of ownership coming into this team, a lot of favorable pricing, good matchup, 20% ownership on DraftKings coming into an 8K Karl Anthony Towns, power forward eligible. That certainly looks good. 20% coming into a $6,600 Rudy Gobert. That looks good. Naz Reid's pulling 38% ownership as a $4,600 power forward / center. The minutes on him are obviously concerning. Played 19 minutes last game, including a minute and a half of garbage time. So, like, if you get the 18-minute Naz Reid game, that's not going to look great. But we know that he's a good point per minute guy. He plays alongside Gobert. He plays alongside Towns. So that's appealing. If either of those guys get in foul trouble, it's Naz Reid getting more minutes. And then, if Naz Reid is playing well, he can also just play his way into more minutes. So he looks like a pretty good value. 38% is really scary, but does look like a good value at that salary, especially with the relative lack of cheap plays that we have right now. Anthony Edwards' salary has dropped a little bit. Shooting guard, small forward, 8,800, 7.5% ownership. So he's very comparable, I think, to Lauri Markkanen on the other side of this game, where he's getting a little bit more ownership. He does project better, but same kind of play where if you're just optimizing lineups, you're not really going to get to Anthony Edwards. But once you start factoring in that range of outcomes and what Anthony Edwards can do in his good games, he starts to show up a little bit. And at 7% owned, it looks pretty nice if you have, a bunch of 20, 25% owned guys, and then you're able to offset that with a 7% owned Anthony Edwards and just hope that he goes out there and puts up a massive game. Mike Conley at 4,800 looks like a very good value. Don't know why he's only $4,800, but he's getting 28% ownership. Jaden McDaniels at 4,400 only played 21 minutes last game, but in the first, he did lose minutes to garbage time. In the first half, he played about 13 and a half minutes. I think if you're expecting 26, 27 minutes for a $4,400 McDaniels, that looks okay. Kyle Anderson probably playing low to mid 20s off the bench at 4,500. Right now, Anderson is getting 17% ownership. McDaniels is getting 7. I think those numbers balance out. I don't think there should be, or there is much of a difference between McDaniels and Anderson. So if we were to get closer to lock and Anderson is still just getting all of the ownership, I would really like McDaniels, but I do think it's likely that you just kind of see that split out and they both get, 10% ownership or so.
All right, one game to go. Trick or treat time. That would be NBA treat. All one word, 50% off the lineup generator. After that, it is $8.95 per week. You get it for all the slate 7 days a week. So it is a lot of fun. You can check that out. Over there, you can use, you can lock in players. You can choose different lineup types. You can export it very easily into your CSVs and upload that to your DFS sites of choice. It supports FanDuel and DraftKings. Definitely want to check it out. It does leverage all of the other tools, the boom bust, the projections, the player projections, both from a performance and from a popularity standpoint, leverage, etc., simulations galore. It wraps all of that into one nice package, and you literally are just pushing a couple of buttons. Not a bad way to go. Final game.
One other thing I wanted to mention, I just talked about Jaden McDaniels and Kyle Anderson looking very similar to each other, and that I thought their ownership should end up being close. I don't think Naz Reid should be 3 times as popular as either of them either. I think you're talking about 3 very similar plays where you're expecting more minutes for McDaniels and Anderson than for Reid most of the time, but Reid is, a better point per minute guy. I'd be kind of fine if my exposure to those 3 was pretty balanced, so you're taking some away from Reid and you're giving some more to McDaniels and Anderson.
All right, final game of the night. This is the lone 9 o'clock game. We've got 3 at 7, 3 at 8, and then this one standing by itself. It is the Chicago Bulls in Denver. They played last night in Chicago, where they lost to Brooklyn. You've got Ayo Dosunmu. Oh, I should have not looked at his name, and I should have just said it since it's Ayo Dosunmu, and I don't know why I can't just say that. He's dealing with an illness. This is a back-to-back as well as a 3 and 4. For Chicago. Last night, you saw Levine play 38 minutes. Vooch played 36. Very disappointing outcome for him. Kobe White played 35 I think he was in the starting lineup. And then you had DeMar DeRozan playing 33. Keep an eye on this one. It is back-to-back at altitude. On the Denver side, back-to-back for them as well. They beat Dallas 125-114. They did play most of their starters for most of the fourth quarter. You saw Jamal Murray play 39 minutes. Wouldn't shock me if he gets a night off. KCP played 37. He'll be out there chugging along once again. Jokic played 36. Aaron Gordon played 35. And then MPJ, Michael Porter Jr., had a great fantasy performance in 34 minutes. Take us through the final game, Adam, and we will slide on out of here.
Yeah, much different spot for Chicago tonight than last night. Last night, you were getting to a lot of Levine, a lot of Vooch, a lot of DeRozan, good amount of Kobe White. I think he was like 15% owned. Tonight, the most popular guy on DraftKings right now is Levine at 9%. Shooting guard, small forward, 7,600. Very similar price to yesterday, just not as appealing a matchup. And it's the back-to-back, makes things tough. Still perfectly fine in tournaments, but there's just, better. There are guys that are going to show up in your lineups more tonight. Same goes for Vooch at 7,700, 5% owned. Don't mind getting there. Just, 5% owned Vooch is always perfectly fine. But, when Rudy Gobert is $1,100 less and you're likely to have some value from Orlando at center, and there's, just other good centers always, he's, less of a priority. Same goes for DeRozan. So nothing that really stands out here. We did get Torrey Craig in the starting lineup last night rather. He started, played 23 minutes. He's only 3,500 at power forward. You can't expect much out of him, but he's getting 4% ownership. If you just desperately need a play in that range and he's starting, you can take that shot. But, Torrey Craig is not out there to produce fantasy points, essentially.
All righty. We have 2 NFL shows coming up today. You've got the Tournament Strategy Show at 1. You've got the Thinking Outside the Box lineup show at 4. You have Live Before Lock tonight at 6. You've got the NHL DFS Strategy Show at 2. And right now, you've got college football Live Before Lock. It is just launched on its own stream on the Stochastic YouTube channel. You guys can follow Adam on Twitter at ShipMyMoneyDFS. I am at EMac DFS. And of course, it is Stochastic_COM. With that, gamers, good luck.